He kept to himself mostly. James Walker, a quiet black man who had once worn the uniform of a soldier, who had stood in deserts and jungles, who had seen things that never left his mind, things that clawed at him in the middle of the night when the world was silent, and though he was home now, safe on his little street, the war never truly left him. It lived in his chest, in his heartbeat, in his memories. And the doctors had called it PTSD, but James just called it his burden, one he carried. Alone because he didn't trust the world to understand, he watered his lawn, he fixed his fence, he waved politely, but he rarely spoke, until one day his silence became the reason his neighbor decided he was strange, weak, less than. Her name was Karen Miller, a woman with a sharp tongue, sharper than her smile, the kind of person who thrived on gossip and judgment. And she made it her business to tell anyone who would listen that James was unstable, broken, dangerous. She whispered lies at the mailbox, smirked when she saw him flinch at fireworks on the 4th of July, and one afternoon she even laughed loud enough for him to hear. That man jumps at his own shadow, some soldier he must have been, can't even handle living in the suburbs. Her words cut deeper than she knew, not because James cared about her opinion, but because every chuckle, every whisper, every mocking glance reminded him of how invisible his sacrifice was, how people enjoyed the safety he had fought for while ridiculing the scars it left on him, and though he never said a word, he carried that pain quietly, like he carried everything else, bottling it up until it became a storm inside him. His only refuge was the little dog tags he still wore under his shirt. The reminder that once upon a time, he had been trusted with men's lives, with missions that mattered, that he had been strong enough to endure what others could not, even if the world only saw weakness now. One evening, while Karen and her friends were sitting outside drinking wine, she saw James walk past with his groceries, his shoulders tense, his eyes downward, and she couldn't resist. She called out across the yard, "Careful, James, don't drop those bags. Wouldn't want the noise to scare you into another episode." Her friends erupted into laughter, and James froze for a moment, his grip tightening on the bags, his jaw clenched. Then he walked on, saying nothing, though inside his chest the shame and anger battled for space. When he got inside his home he set the bags down and sat at the table with his head in his hands, whispering to himself, one day she'll learn." Days passed, weeks passed, and the tension between them grew, James ignoring her, Karen escalating her mockery, until one night everything changed. It was late, the moon high, the neighborhood quiet, when suddenly a scream shattered the silence, a scream so sharp it pierced through James's walls. He shot up from his bed, instincts kicking in like muscle memory, and when he ran to the window, he saw flames flickering from Karen's kitchen, smoke pouring out, her silhouette in the window, pounding on the glass, trapped, crying for help. Without a thought James ran out barefoot, his body moving faster than his mind, and as he reached her front door the smoke was thick, the heat brutal. But to a man who had once run through burning barracks to save his brothers, it was nothing new. He kicked the door down with one strike, ducked low, crawled through the smoke, calling out, "Karen, where are you?" And through her coughs she screamed, "The kitchen. I can't get out." He found her slumped near the stove, flames licking the walls, her eyes wide with terror, the same woman who mocked his trauma now trembling in his arms as he scooped her up, wrapping his jacket around her, guiding her through the smoke, and as beams cracked above them, as glass shattered and flames roared, James's heart pounded not with fear but with focus, the same focus that had carried him through war. And in one swift motion he burst out the front door carrying her over his shoulder, collapsing onto the lawn just as neighbors came running, hoses spraying, phones dialing 911. Karen lay coughing, gasping, her face pale with shock, staring up at the man she had mocked for months, the man she had belittled, the man she had laughed at, now the reason she was alive, and tears filled her eyes as she croaked, You saved me." James just looked down at her, his expression unreadable, his voice calm. "War taught me never to leave anyone behind, even the ones who don't see your worth." The neighbors gasped at his words, realization spreading like wildfire, guilt-ridden across Karen's face as she understood the weight of what she had done, how she had treated a man whose strength she could never match, and in that moment the power shifted, the underdog no longer under anything, his dignity shining brighter than the flames that still smoldered behind them. The firefighters arrived, the fire was contained, and Karen was taken to the hospital, but the story spread fast, the neighborhood buzzing with the irony of it all, the man mocked for his scars becoming the hero who saved the one who mocked him, and justice was served not with revenge, but with grace, because James didn't humiliate her, he didn't demand apologies, he simply walked back to his porch, sat in silence, and let the truth speak for itself. The lesson was clear: never underestimate the battles someone has fought, never mock scars you don't understand, because the very person you dismiss today might be the one who saves your life tomorrow, and dignity is not proven by words but by actions in the moments that matter most. But just as peace seemed to settle, just as Karen prepared to apologize, just as James thought the fire was behind them, a new storm began to brew. James remembered men like that. Ones who sent others to do their dirty work. Cowards in expensive shoes. That night, James sat on his porch again. Dog tags in hand. Watching. Thinking. Because the war had never really ended. It had just changed uniforms. The next morning, Karen knocked on his door. Her voice was trembling. I know I don't deserve to ask you this. But I'm scared. I think whoever tried to kill me, they're not finished. James studied her face. I keep hearing things at night, she whispered. I keep thinking the fire's going to come back. She looked up at him, tears welling. James, will you help me? He didn't answer right away. Just stepped aside and let her in. Because deep down, he knew. This wasn't over. Not even close. The neighborhood slept, but James Walker didn't. He sat in his dark living room, boots laced, bat by the door, eyes fixed on the soft glow of the street lamp bleeding through his blinds. Karen had gone home a few hours earlier, still shaken from the note, clutching her curtains like they were bulletproof. James knew that kind of fear. Not the kind that screamed and ran, but the kind that lingered, like smoke in the lungs, like static under the skin. Fear that whispered instead of shouted. Next time, he won't be there to save you. That wasn't just a threat, it was a challenge. A message to him. Someone was watching. Someone knew James had stepped in. Someone wanted him out of the way. And tonight, James planned to answer that challenge. He'd seen the signs. The subtle shifts. Karen's ex-husband, Alan, hanging around again, always with a smile too smug for a grieving ex. He had money, charm, a name that bought him out of consequences. But James had seen men like him fall in war zones. All it took was pressure in the right place. So James applied pressure the way he knew best, by waiting. He watched her house from the shadows of his porch. No lights inside. Curtains drawn. A setup. Karen knew the plan. She was scared, yes, but she trusted him now. Funny how trauma reversed roles, how the protector became the protected, and the scoffer became the one clinging to survival. Minutes crawled by. Then an hour. Nothing. James shifted slightly. Something was wrong. Then he heard it. Not the back gate creaking like last time. Not a scuffle behind the fence. This time it came from his yard. A rustle. Quick. Sharp. Followed by a low, deliberate crunch on gravel. James didn't hesitate. He grabbed the bat, slid into the shadows of his porch, and crouched low behind the hedges. His breath slowed, heartbeat even. He became the dark. A figure stepped into view. Tall. Hooded. Gloved. Not approaching Karen's house. Coming toward him. James moved quickly. Quiet as death. The figure was already at his back door, pulling something from a duffel, thin wires, a box, tape. Not fire this time. Something else. James stepped behind him, raised the bat, and stopped cold. He recognized the face beneath the hood. But not Alan. Someone else. Younger. Leaner. Nervous. The figure spun, startled, hands up, but it was too late. James pinned him to the wall, pressing the bat to his throat. "Who sent you?" I don't know names, man," the kid stammered. "I just got paid to drop this off." "Drop what?" The kid's eyes flicked to the duffel. James grabbed it, tore it open. Inside, an explosive device. Crude, homemade, but deadly. Enough to level half his living room. James's stomach turned cold. This wasn't just a threat anymore. It was a war. 15 minutes later, the kid sat cuffed on James's front steps, shaking as flashing red and blue lights filled the street. Karen stood nearby, wrapped in a blanket, pale as ash. The police asked questions. The kid said the same thing again and again. "I don't know his name. He just gave me a burner phone, and said deliver the bag to the back of the veteran's house. Told me not to ask questions." "Did he look like this man?" the officer asked, showing a photo of Alan. The kid hesitated. I don't think so. He was shorter. Stockier. Older." James's jaw tightened. So it wasn't Alan. Or at least not directly. Someone else was involved. A middleman. Or worse, a partner. The next day, Karen sat across from James in his kitchen, the morning sun slanting in through the blinds. "Why you?" she asked, voice soft. "Why not just go after me again?" James didn't answer right away. Then, finally, "Because I'm in the way now. I made it clear I won't stand down. That makes me a threat." Karen rubbed her eyes. "This is bigger than Alan, isn't it?" James nodded. "Much bigger." He placed the burner phone from the duffel bag on the table. It was cracked, nearly dead, but had one saved number. "Let's see what kind of man sends boys to do his killing," he muttered. He powered it on. No password. One contact. He tapped it. One message. "Drop it off. Walk away. You're paid. No loose ends." Karen leaned in. "S. Could that be?" James's phone buzzed. Unknown number. One message. "Nice catch, soldier. But you're late to the war. You protected her from fire. Let's see if you can protect her from what comes next." James's blood went ice cold. The message was sent seconds ago. The phone in the duffel hadn't sent it. Someone else was watching. Watching him. He rose from the table, scanning the window. Across the street, a parked van. Ordinary. Too ordinary. James grabbed his jacket. "Stay here." "James, wait. I won't let anyone touch you," he said without turning back. He stepped outside. The air was still. The van sat in the same spot. He approached slowly, one step at a time. His dog tag swung lightly against his chest. But before he reached the door, the engine roared. The van peeled away, tires screeching down Sycamore Lane. James sprinted after it, but it was gone within seconds. Back in his driveway, he found a note tucked under his wiper. A single line, typed in all caps. "You think this ends with her? You're not just in the way. You're next." That night, James stood by the window, every light off. He thought he'd been protecting Karen from someone trying to claim her house. But this wasn't about property anymore. It wasn't even about her. It was about him. Whoever was behind this knew his name. His record. His trauma. They were turning the battlefield inward. He wasn't just being hunted. He was being tested. The next morning, the police returned. "Mr. Walker," one of them said, voice grim. "We ran prints on that burner phone you found." James said nothing. Just waited. The officer hesitated. The prints matched a man named Samuel Briggs. Former private contractor. Discharged dishonorably. Worked overseas, under the same unit you did. James's heart skipped a beat. He remembered that name. Samuel Briggs. The man who disappeared after the ambush in Kandahar. The one who left his team behind. The one James had testified against. The one who vowed revenge. The name echoed in James Walker's mind like a rifle shot. Samuel Briggs. A ghost from a war he'd spent years trying to forget. Briggs had once worn the same uniform as James, had once fought beside him. But that was before he broke under pressure, before he abandoned his unit in the middle of a firefight and left men to die. James had testified at the inquiry. Called Briggs what he was, a coward. Briggs had disappeared after that. Discharged. Vanished into the underworld of private military contracts and shady work overseas. Now he was back. And he wasn't hiding anymore. The weeks that followed were like walking a razor's edge. James kept watch every night. Karen moved in with a friend, too terrified to stay at her house. Surveillance cameras went up around the neighborhood. The police said they were investigating. But James knew the truth. This wasn't going to end in court. It was going to end in combat. Because Briggs wasn't after Karen. He was after him. James received no more messages. Just silence. But he felt it, the storm building. The same tension he felt before every firefight. The quiet hum before the world went loud. So he prepared. He cleaned his weapons. He studied the layout of his street like a battlefield. He even made peace with the idea that he might not survive this time. But he wouldn't go down without a fight. Not again. It happened 3 nights later. The power went out across the block. Clean cut. No warning. James was ready. He had a generator running within seconds, lights flooding his yard. He stood on his porch, shotgun in hand, eyes scanning the darkness beyond. Then he saw them. 2 figures. Not Briggs. Hired hands. Armed. Moving fast. They didn't say a word, they didn't have to. James dropped one with a warning shot into the gravel. The second returned fire, forcing James to take cover behind the porch column. Glass shattered. Sirens began to wail somewhere far off. James moved low, fast. Military muscle memory. The second man breached the porch. James tackled him, slammed the shotgun into his ribs, and left him groaning in the grass. Then everything went quiet. Too quiet. Until James heard the sound of slow, deliberate clapping behind him. He turned. Samuel Briggs. Older. Scarred. Smiling like a man who'd already won. "Well, damn, Walker," he said. "You're still sharp. Didn't expect that." James raised the shotgun. "Drop whatever you're carrying." Briggs raised his hands, but he didn't stop smiling. "Karen Miller was just bait," he said. "You know that, right? All this? The fire? The threats? It was never about her. You tried to kill a woman to get to me," James growled. "That's who you are now." Briggs stepped forward. "You took everything from me when you testified. Stripped my name, my career, my life. I've been waiting a long time for this." James didn't lower the weapon. "You stripped your own life when you ran. You left me no choice. You left your men to die." Briggs's smile faltered. For a second, the mask slipped, and James saw it. The guilt buried under rage. The weakness dressed up as vengeance. Then Briggs lunged. But James was faster. 2 shots. Center mass. Briggs collapsed on the porch steps, choking on blood and disbelief. James stood over him, breathing hard. "You came to remind me of the war," James said quietly. But I never left it. Briggs's eyes went still. And it was over. The aftermath was chaos, police reports, media vans, flashing lights, interviews. James gave a statement. The men were armed, dangerous, hired by Briggs. The threat was neutralized. No charges were filed against him. Karen returned a few days later. She stood on his porch, tears in her eyes, unable to speak for a long time. When she finally did, her voice cracked. I don't deserve your forgiveness. James didn't say anything at first. He just looked out at the street, the one he'd almost died protecting. You don't need my forgiveness, he said. You just need to remember. Karen nodded, understanding now what she hadn't before. What dignity looked like. What strength really was. Not loud. Not cruel. Just constant. Steady. Quiet. Like James. Weeks passed. The neighborhood changed. People nodded at James now. Some even saluted. But he didn't care for recognition. He watered his lawn. He fixed his fence. He waved politely. But now, when he did, people waved back. And though the war would always live in his chest, in his heartbeat, in his memories, James Walker had finally won one thing the battlefield had never given him.